The Smart Cities mission was Narendra Modi's flagship program, but it was quite explicitly celebrated for involving citizens in an unprecedented manner. And in this sense, our research wanted to better understand the sort of this engagement process, the impact it had on decision making, and the perception and experiences of key stakeholders in 3 case study cities, Bhubaneswar, Davangere, and Faridabad, shown here in the map in pink, so getting a good regional spread. These were mostly chosen because they are supposedly exemplar submissions, 2 of which were in the top 20, and Faridabad came first in the first round. And we conducted fieldwork between July and October 2016, and the findings in the analysis that I'm presenting today are based on primarily 34 expert interviews alongside examinations of the actual Smart Cities proposals and the Smart City specific websites. And interviewees were characters like key municipal officials, state government officials, representatives from the consulting firms, local academics, journalists, architects, NGOs. 3/4 of the interviews and have deep knowledge of the bid, and then a 25% were these sort of sort of themes. So in reviewing the mechanisms of what was used to engage with citizens, we ask who participated, who was engaged. Highlighting the differences in the perspectives of different stakeholders with regards to outreach levels, we ask whose voice mattered. Then asking to the extent to which citizen engagement impacted decision-making, i.e. how meaningful was this participation, and was there perhaps a tendency towards tokenism? And finally, the relationship between citizen participation and inequality, which is fundamentally the relationship between inequality and democratic accountability, which also touches upon the challenges of engaging entire cities. So 1, who participated, who was engaged? Interviews conducted for this research showed that in each of the 3 cities, municipal and state officials and consultants viewed and valued this engagement and interacting, describing the citizen participation as a defining feature of the mission. A consultant on the Faridabad bid quotes, "The government had very strict guidelines that you must do severe citizen consultation and objectively showcase it. On a policy level, the approach shifted from a top-down approach to a bottom-up approach." So this is being seen as a fundamental shift. Here, a ULB member in Bhubaneswar describes, if you look at social media, Bhubaneswar's Smart City Facebook page had the largest community across any Indian city, and we are not a big city by Indian standards. So with 1 million population, we had 100,000 people as members on Facebook, which is about 10% of the population. So although most interviews found the Smart Cities mission led to greater citizen engagement, more the depth of this engagement. So in Bhubaneswar, with the city claiming to reach out to 10% of the population, interviews involved with this engagement activity, marginalized residents, children, squatter settlements, transgender groups, all sounds really positive. And in Faridabad, this engagement was with citizens from all walks of life, a similar story. Educated groups and students were disproportionately represented in the participatory activities by virtue of their literacy levels, their ability to access the internet, and their influence with the state. So, whose voice mattered? The research found that when efforts were made to reach out to citizens from a range of backgrounds, ideas and concerns voiced by citizens differed starkly by socioeconomic class, as described by a consultant in Bhubaneswar. There is a very clear wall between the rich and the poor in each of the cities. Answers relating to the smartness of the city will depend on which side of the wall you're going to. So, reflecting on this engagement process, a significant number of the interviewees shared the view that people in slums were concerned about livelihoods, basic infrastructure, and expressed fear of eviction, whilst more privileged groups were interested in mobile technology, traffic improvements, solar energy, slum-free cities, and uninterrupted service provision. Summarized by a consultant involved in 2 Smart Cities bids, but here reflecting on Faridabad's, Everybody has a different perspective of smart cities, what that means. For slum dwellers, it means that slum areas will be removed and they'll be displaced. And from a state official, at the end, when the planning part comes, you have to be strict and you have to make some uncomfortable decisions because there's only a limited amount of money and you cannot benefit everyone, particularly in a city of 1.6 million. So as a result of all of this, input from educated groups carried more weight in the final submissions. In Faridabad, a consultant described that the final area-based development, one of the two key components of the bid, so along with the PCPs, had in fact come from more organized and well-to-do groups of citizens, which were then refined by the consultants and presented back to the citizens for polling. A similar story in other questions, which raises questions about the entire premise of the participation efforts. So, how meaningful was this participation? Many interviewees acknowledged that though there were attempts to engage in meaningful participation, it might have been possible that citizen engagement was used to make it look like a lot of people were participating. Evidencing this, a local government official closely involved with the Bhubaneswar bid, a city that came first in the competition and was generally commended for its amazing engagement, shared that the city understood that it wasn't simply citizen engagement that was important, perception of participation. Quote, though citizen engagement was 16% of the evaluation, we realized that it was going to make much more of an impact in the perception of people who were evaluating. Across all cities, interviewees involved in the bid described the participation generally as overhyped, in some instances fake, a numbers game, and primarily benefiting a select demographic of the city. I just want to reiterate that these are people involved in the bids who are saying this, and not kind of me as a lefty ranting academic. Here, as expressed by the public sector, representatives involved in the Faridabad bid, citizen engagement was not very reciprocal. Let me be honest with you. It's meaningful, but it's more of a showcase. I doubt it would really help determine priorities. So the perception of citizen engagement was thus limited to the rungs of informing, consulting, and placating, in contrast to partnership, delegated power, and citizen control. So finally, what this means for inequality and democratic accountability. Accounting for different voices and empowering marginalized groups remains a key challenge in citizen engagement efforts more generally and globally. But in the Indian sense, questions of participation cannot be divorced from questions of inequality and accountability. This research shows that many interviewees feared that the Smart Cities mission ran the risk of solidifying inequality in society while reducing democratic accountability in the long run. They suggested that the creation of exclusive enclaves in the form of the ABD would serve as a showcase, a beautification program, benefiting private interest in the well-to-do, instead of the poor who required investment in basic infrastructure. As articulated by an interviewee involved in the Bhubaneswar bid, Smart Cities, in my opinion, is very elitist. You don't have basic services, you don't have drains. Are we looking at the right one? Yes. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually put this quote up there. You don't have basic services, you don't have drains, roads, and then you create a model, create a kind of showpiece. It only widens the disparity. Within the city, we have huge disparity. If you want to develop the posh area into a global model, then you're further increasing the disparity, the inequality. So, in addition to this, all interviews from all three cities expressed their concern that the special purpose vehicle representatives. I know this is, but in some of them it is. The would municipal capacity, and that actually this is an antithesis to the 74th Amendment that aimed to empower municipalities. An entire city is a challenging task for any government, particularly in contexts of high economic and social inequality. The availability of digital technology offers governments a powerful tool to meet this challenge, yet presents its own set of limitations. Large amounts of data generated online was difficult to analyze and translate into concrete solutions, rendering certain modes of citizen engagement meaningless. Although citizen engagement under this mission was celebrated by popular media as the beginning of a bottom-up approach in urban planning, a significant number of projects in all three cities prior to the mission, suggesting citizen engagement was potentially used to create a false consensus for decisions made elsewhere. Interviewees And despite efforts to citizens from a range of backgrounds, still young, educated, middle-class citizens were overrepresented. Whilst citizen engagement is seen in popular discourse as a means to tilt the odds in favor of the poor, sort of in literature, here we see that it's being instrumentally used to service the interests of more entrenched and private groups. And in fact, in the long run, it's creating consensus for outcomes that may be harmful to the poor. And finally, with traditional accountability structures being replaced with an SPV, and there are many incarcerations or parastatals, they are unlikely to improve service responsiveness, accountability, local government capacity, and contribute to greater democratization. And so, with the clock ticking and a concluding comment, this research does not deny the importance of citizen engagement or that it even happened, but it's aimed to draw attention to the way that it's practiced. It's important to note, just as this caveat, this was a small sample of case studies and thus limited conclusions, and also, and it doesn't represent the very diverse experiences of all cities, and it also doesn't represent the views of people on the ground. But I will leave you with this image of one of Frida Bud's many engagement tools, a thumbs up and Coca-Cola dispenser called Rahul. Thank you very much.